The enduring saga of vanishing wealth, the mystery of missing World War II gold. Gold has always transcended the definition of a mere metal. For thousands of years it has stood as the ultimate perennial store of intrinsic value, a bedrock for the establishment and maintenance of vast empires, and a silent enduring witness to the darkest chapters of human history and our greatest crimes. In the immense financial and political turmoil that succeeded the Second World War, more gold bullion was covertly transacted and moved in secrecy than perhaps during any other corresponding period of recorded history. Gold reserves belonging to legitimate governments, central banks, treasuries of occupied nations, and assets held by private citizens vanished without an official trace, absorbed into deep vaults and intricate financial mechanisms that no legitimate authority was able or willing to officially recognize. The war concluded with a clear declaration of military victors, but in the labyrinthine shadows of global diplomacy and high finance, the true winners were often those highly skilled individuals and clandestine organizations possessing the capability to effortlessly move immense wealth across international borders, leaving no auditable paper trail. This intricate narrative is the detailed account of precisely how the world's most historically trusted form of money was systematically smuggled, stolen, meticulously laundered, and deeply hidden, and why a significant portion of this immense treasure remains officially unaccounted for and missing to this very day. To fully comprehend the sheer magnitude of how such colossal amounts of gold could simply disappear, one must vividly recall the paramount symbolic and financial value it represented during the volatile early 20th century. Prior to the devastating war, the vast majority of the world's sovereign currency was firmly anchored and backed by physical gold reserves. Central banks globally hoarded this precious metal, recognizing it as the ultimate inviolable guarantee for their circulating paper money and national credit. For entire nations, gold represented absolute credibility and financial solvency. For ordinary individuals, it symbolized unquestionable security and liquidity in a world that was rapidly approaching a terrifying global conflict. As political tensions escalated across Europe in the late 1930s, governments, acutely fearing imminent invasion, began the desperate and massive endeavor of moving their critical national reserves overseas. The Netherlands quietly but urgently shipped over 120 tons of gold to the relative safety of Britain, Canada, and the United States. Belgium likewise transferred hundreds of tons to what they optimistically considered safe locations. When the German Nazi forces launched their rapid advance in 1940, they moved with predatory speed to seize the gold reserves of every country they successfully occupied. Gold was not simply opportunistic loot, it became an essential financial instrument of war finance. Nazi Germany efficiently utilized captured gold to purchase critical scarce war supplies and strategic materials from neutral countries, particularly from Switzerland, whose banking institutions and private banks were more than willing to accept the bullion, often without raising critical inquiries about its highly suspicious provenance. The most notorious and widely cited instance involved Belgium's national gold. Before the occupation, Belgium had strategically entrusted 198 tons of its reserves to the Bank of France for guaranteed safekeeping. When France itself rapidly fell, that gold was subsequently shipped ostensibly for protection to the port of Dakar in West Africa, which was then under Vichy French control. From that remote location, it mysteriously and quietly made its covert way back into the hands of the German Reichsbank, effectively providing a crucial and devastating source of finance for the ongoing Nazi war machine. Other nations attempted to be far more prudent and cautious. Poland, anticipating the certain invasion, executed a daring and heroic evacuation of its entire gold reserves, moving them across perilous routes through Romania, Turkey, and eventually to the distant safety of the United States and Canada. Even despite these extraordinary efforts, vast amounts of gold located within occupied territories ultimately fell into Nazi hands. Much of this stolen gold was brutally melted down, recast into anonymous bars, and deliberately stripped of any identifying mint marks to completely obscure its original source and rightful ownership. But the systematic Nazi theft represented only one major facet of this global story. As the global war fiercely raged, the Japanese Empire was simultaneously conducting its own extensive plundering operations across Asia. In occupied China, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines, the Japanese military seized massive quantities of gold, silver, precious stones, and priceless cultural treasures. These assets were often referenced in post-war accounts as part of the so-called Golden Lily operation. The treasure was allegedly concealed in highly sophisticated secret vaults and extensive tunnel systems, especially within the Philippines, to be retrieved secretly after the conclusion of the war. While some elements of these narratives have since migrated into the realm of local legend, there exists credible and substantial evidence that truly significant quantities of precious metals were indeed covertly stashed away and were never officially recovered or accounted for by the Allied powers. Just as in Europe, these Asian military operations deliberately blurred the critical line between legitimate military conquest and outright state-sponsored organized crime. By 1945, as Allied forces inexorably advanced, both German and Japanese authorities desperately attempted to move, destroy, or hide whatever remaining wealth they could. The Allies succeeded in capturing some of this immense hoard. The U.S. military's Monuments, Fine Arts and Archives program famously uncovered not only stolen artwork but also colossal caches of gold in remote salt mines and hidden military depots. One of the most prominent discoveries was made in the Merkers salt mine in Germany, where American forces located over 100 tons of gold bars, coins and currency notes alongside irreplaceable artworks. Yet the gold recovered at Merkers represented only a mere fraction of the total amount that had been comprehensively seized and looted. The remainder had already vanished, traded, laundered through the sophisticated financial systems of neutral banks, or buried in locations that remain officially unknown to this day. This is the point where the central narrative seamlessly transitions from the clear wartime theft to the complex, murky landscape of post-war geopolitics. The immediate aftermath of the war was an era of utter chaos. Europe was in physical ruin. National borders were rapidly shifting, and the emerging Cold War was beginning to acutely define the new global power structures. This environment proved to be fertile ground for enormous unaccounted wealth to be quietly absorbed and integrated into new power structures and state reserves. The Allies established the Tripartite Gold Commission (TGC) in 1946 with the express mission of redistributing recovered gold to the countries from which it had been systematically stolen. Over its many decades of operation, the Commission successfully processed approximately 336 tons of recovered gold. However, compared to the conservative estimate of thousands of tons believed to have been ruthlessly seized during the war, this was undoubtedly a comparatively small share. The vast remainder simply vanished into deeply private vault state reserves that were never officially acknowledged, or intricate financial networks that spanned across multiple continents. One of the most deeply controversial aspects of this era was the highly questionable role played by neutral nations, particularly Switzerland. The Swiss National Bank and major private Swiss banks purchased hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold from Nazi Germany throughout the war years. While a portion of this gold may have originated from legitimate pre-war reserves, a large amount was clearly looted from occupied countries, or even gruesomely from individuals who perished in the Holocaust. In the late 1990s, extensive historical investigations unequivocally confirmed that Swiss banks had knowingly dealt in stolen gold, and in numerous critical cases had maintained absolute banking secrecy long after the war had ended. Similar serious allegations were leveled against major banks and financial institutions in Portugal, Spain, Sweden, and Turkey, which had all acted as vital intermediaries for the massive wartime gold flows. The post-war years also witnessed the significant rise of covert intelligence operations, partially financed by completely untraceable assets in a deeply divided world, split between East and West, having access to gold that could not be officially linked to any governmental ledger was deemed absolutely invaluable. Persistent allegations suggest that a portion of this missing wartime gold was systematically utilized to fund anti-communist operations, support favored political parties, or stabilize friendly but fragile regimes across both Europe and Asia. In this fundamental sense, the gold did not merely vanish, it was effectively repurposed and integrated into the complex machinery of a new kind of global conflict, one fought with espionage, propaganda, and economic leverage rather than overt open battle. By the 1950s and 1960s, the vast majority of the world had transitioned to more complex and sophisticated financial systems, but gold remained central to international settlements under the Bretton Woods system. Officially, Gold prices were fixed and national reserves were meticulously declared, and officially it is highly probable that some countries held significantly more than they publicly admitted, and some of the gold stored in official vaults may have possessed a much darker and hidden history. Nations like the United States and the United Kingdom, which had received and absorbed large quantities of European gold during the war years, incorporated it into their national reserves, often without any public discussion or scrutiny of its precise origins. For countries urgently rebuilding their devastated economies, the uncomfortable ethical question of whether the gold in their vaults had once belonged to someone else was frequently ignored in the critical interest of securing national financial stability. And yet the great mystery profoundly endures even today. Researchers, dedicated treasure hunters, and governments occasionally announce seemingly new findings: a buried cache of bullion in a remote forest, a train purportedly loaded with valuables hidden deep within a mountain tunnel, a shipwreck carrying gold bars originally intended for wartime payments. Many of these highly sensational claims turn out to be exaggerated fabrications or simply false, but a few discoveries have proven to be genuine. The comprehensive historical record is unequivocally clear. Large amounts of gold went missing between 1939 and 1945, and much of it has never been officially or ethically recovered. In purely financial terms, we are discussing billions of dollars. In contemporary value, in symbolic terms, it remains a stark reminder that in times of profound crisis, the fundamental rules of ownership, morality, and law are often deliberately suspended. The modern contemporary connection to this historical narrative is less about the specific gold bars that vanished and more about the underlying sophisticated mechanisms of disappearance. The Second World War incontrovertibly proved how quickly and efficiently immense wealth can be moved, hidden, and fundamentally transformed when powerful actors collectively decide that normal financial rules no longer apply. The very same techniques moving assets across international borders, laundering through various intermediaries, concealing true ownership through complex shell entities, are still actively employed today, not solely by governments but also by massive corporations and high net worth individuals. In moments of major financial crisis, assets do not simply evaporate into thin air, they frequently reappear in the hands of those individuals and entities possessing the means, capacity, and infrastructure to effectively conceal them. For investors, the resulting lesson is harsh and unequivocal. Gold may appear to be the safest asset, immune to the ravages of inflation, political upheaval, or currency collapse, but its actual safety ultimately hinges on where it is physically stored and, critically, who is in physical and legal control of it. In wartime Europe, having gold stored in your national central bank offered no protection if an invading army could seize it overnight. In peacetime, holding physical gold in a jurisdiction that later changes its laws or freezes foreign accounts can be equally perilous. The disappearance of gold after the Second World War is not merely a historical curiosity. It serves as a powerful cautionary case study in precisely how wealth can be systematically stripped away under the convenient cover of global chaos. The financial historian's takeaway lesson is simple: history does not strictly repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. When global systems are placed under extreme stress, whether from armed conflict, economic collapse, or geopolitical rivalry, the critical line between illegal financial transfer and outright theft becomes perilously thin. The missing gold of the post-war years is a chilling testament to just how fragile financial security can truly be when the entire world is violently turned upside down. In today's hyperconnected world of digital money, cryptocurrencies, and rapidly shifting geopolitical alliances, the essential question is not whether wealth can still disappear, but rather how instantaneously it can happen and whether you will notice it before it becomes irrevocably too late. Understanding these historical patterns is not merely financial education, it is paramount self-defense.